Welcome to the NABS Now podcast, brought to you by the National Association of Blind Students, a proud division of the National Federation of the Blind.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the NABS Now podcast. I'm your host, Nina, and I'm joined with a friend of mine who will be co-hosting today's podcast.
Hello, I'm Sayu, and it's great to be here with Nina today.
And today we're going to be talking about everything studying abroad as a blind student. So I know that studying abroad programs have been increasing across the country and beyond, and it's going to be a great opportunity to hear from some fellow blind students about their study abroad experiences. So I know in particular my school is expanding its study abroad program, and I believe that we are now including regions within Europe and Asia. Sayun, what about your school? Has your school been marketing its study abroad programs to students?
Oh, heavily, definitely. I'm an undergraduate student at St. Louis University, and our school has a campus in Madrid, Spain. So a lot of students will often take their fourth semester out of their sophomore year to travel abroad and have a different view and experiences from their St. Louis University campus in Madrid, which is very fun and fascinating.
That's so awesome. I personally have not studied abroad, which is why I'm super excited to get to interview and talk with some fellow blind students of ours who have a ton of study abroad experience. So let's get started.
Joining us for a panel discussion are Katelyn Macintyre and Johna Wright. Lastly, we'll hear from Precious Perez as she narrates her personal study abroad journey to end the podcast. Here we go.
Hi, I'm Johna Wright, and I am a senior at Mercer University in Macon, Georgia. I've studied abroad a couple times now. I did a summer in Sweden this past summer, and I've also done a service and study abroad trip in South Africa, and I'm preparing to go abroad for my third time to the University of Essex in England.
Hi, I'm Katelyn Macintyre, and I am currently residing in Ithaca, New York. And I have a Bachelor of Music and a Master of Music in Vocal Performance, which means I studied opera and all things musical, jazz, all kinds of stuff. And I studied abroad in Heidelberg, Germany for a semester, as well as doing a summer vocal program in Graz, Austria. So I love to travel. And I'm also the Vice President of the National Federation of the Blind Performing Arts Division.
Great. So my first question for you is, what did you look for in the study abroad program, and what led you thinking about the study abroad, or you going to study abroad in the first place?
So I've always had an interest in going abroad. I think learning about other cultures and just seeing how other people live life is really interesting. I don't know, I always was a little anxious to actually take the leap and study abroad, but one of the main things that I looked for in a program was one that gave me a lot of cultural engagement opportunities. So like when I went to South Africa, which was my first ever abroad trip, that allowed me to integrate a lot with the community in the 3 weeks that I was there. And I was able to find my place within the service that I was doing. So I wanted something similar when I went to Sweden. And there were a lot of opportunities while there to dive deeper into Swedish culture and then also all the other cultures of the people who went to my university. That was the main thing that I looked for. And of course, I also looked for a program that was affordable because we're all on like a ramen noodle budget as a college student.
Accurate.
I was actually able to use my federal aid and scholarships to pay for my study abroad programs. I haven't had to pay anything to go abroad.
Well, one of the first things I considered was if it would fit into my major. So as a music major, I studied abroad during my undergrad, and I did want to finish in 4 years, although that's not always necessary for everyone. But I knew that I had to have certain requirements met because music majors have a lot of specific requirements. You know, you don't have just, any gen ed of this or any of these 3 courses. It's very specific of you must take these 4 music history classes and you must take these 4 music theory classes or things like that. And so I knew I had to first check to make sure that studying abroad at a program would fit into those requirements and still allow me to graduate in a reasonable manner, still allow me to achieve some classes that would go toward my degree. So it also depended on what was available to me at my university. So my undergrad university was a pretty small university. I went to Biola University in Southern California, and it's only a school of about 4,000 undergrad, 2,000 grads. So it's pretty small, which also meant that there was really only one program available to music students. There were other study abroad programs, but they were more geared toward the humanities or not a specific major. And so this was actually the perfect thing that kind of fell into place where they offered this one program in Heidelberg, Germany, specifically for music students. And so that really worked out perfectly for me. But as students who are looking for programs, I would look, first of all, does it fit with your major? Will it allow you to take some core courses that you need or something that will be helpful so you're not just taking unnecessary courses that nothing's going to go toward your transcript? And then also, does it have a good reputation? So this program, I knew that I would be studying with some great musicians. Germany has a great history of music. It's one of the birthplaces of opera, not the birthplace,
Absolutely.
but yeah, it is where opera developed a lot. Lieder, German art song. It has such a rich history for what I wanted to study, and so that really fell into my specific career path and my specific goals. Now, if someone is studying international business or something like that, maybe they want to look for a program that really tailors its curriculum to focus on that specific area of studies. I also just love Europe in general. And so that was a highlight to me. I love Germany. I was really interested in the German language. So that was another plus. Studying somewhere that you either know some of the language or you're interested in learning some of the language is also a good thing.
That's awesome.
Beautiful.
As someone who goes to a school that has like 3,500-ish students for my undergrad,
Yes.
I completely sympathize.
Yes.
I studied abroad, but we only have like 1 or 2 programs for everyone, like that
Right.
aren't even major specific. So I completely
Yes. It
sympathize.
can be really
with that.
great and also limiting though.
Exactly. And when we talk to blind students, when we were actually like creating these questions, a huge concern of a lot of our fellow students was getting accommodations in their host country. How did you ensure that you had proper accommodations in place before you went to study abroad?
So I worked really, really closely with our Office of International Programs. They were super great at figuring out what processes we needed to go through and what kinds of things we needed to communicate to the host institution in order for me to have accommodations set up and all ready to go once I got there. Basically, what we did was kind of looked at the accommodations that I normally get at Mercer, and we kind of liaised with their equivalent of disability services. I think it's called pedagogical support in a lot of European countries. Basically, we sent them proof of the accommodations that I get. I filled out like a short form that took me like maybe 10 minutes, and they had everything already set up for me on the day I arrived.
So accommodations can be a challenge in studying abroad. That's kind of the one, I would say, weak point of studying abroad programs. I would say to all blind students, go for it. If you can do it, do it. But definitely that can be a little daunting because, for one thing, not all countries have the same standards. Also, sometimes you just don't know what things are going to be like till you get there. And so that was a little bit daunting. One thing, I had to just be flexible. You don't exactly get the accommodations that you're used to. Sometimes that can be okay. Now, of course, it's still always good to ask and to try to push for the accommodations you need. An example I'll use is I use a lot of really large print materials. I've used a little bit of Braille. That wasn't my primary mode. I did a lot of audio and large print. And so for me, when I was back in my home university, I would get, large amounts of books in these huge papers. And that just wasn't, first of all, practical to do beforehand because I couldn't bring it over in my suitcase. So that was one thing that even with Braille, that would have not really been practical to get those done ahead of time to bring over because I only brought 2 suitcases for the 4 months that I was there. I knew that I would probably be a little more limited in my ability to have those materials in hard copy. So I did get a lot of electronic materials ahead of time. Things that I would normally do, I talked to the professors ahead of time. I figured out what textbooks, which sometimes you can find those posted, but sometimes, if you're trying to prepare several months ahead of time, which I do recommend specifically for a study abroad program, you have to just email the professor and say, hey, what textbooks are you using for world civilizations? Or what textbooks are you using for music history? Exactly, which is great. You kind of do that already. So just maybe do it a little earlier for the study abroad program. Do it maybe in June instead of August or something, So I was able to get some of those electronically through things like Learning Ally, which I used a lot, or, Bookshare is another great resource. So if you can get those ahead of time, that's great. Then you already have a lot of your problems solved. And for things that I still wanted to have in a hard copy, like my German textbook, I did get some of it enlarged over there, but that was a bit complicated because there wasn't really a disability office that I could correspond with. I kind of had to tell my disability office back at my home university to say, hey, please talk to the study abroad people and tell them that I need these things. Mine was a bit unique. We weren't really studying at a specific university, but rather there were classes designed specifically for us coming from Viola studying in Heidelberg, which was really cool because they were tailored to what our university wanted. But it also meant that we didn't really have an office over there that we could, liaison with. And so anyway, it was just a little bit of, talk to so-and-so to talk to so-and-so to talk to so-and-so. I was able to get some of those adapted over there, but that was a little bit more difficult. So plan ahead, but also be flexible, knowing that your accommodations might look a little bit different than they do in your normal day-to-day semester. And that's okay. One of the textbooks I couldn't find electronically. I probably could have pushed a little more to have it directly from the publisher, but I made some friends real quick on the study abroad program, which I highly recommend. Definitely befriend other students. And we were like, you know what? They're like, hey, I'll just read it to you. I have to read it anyway. And I just had a human reader, which you could also ask to hire, which is totally legitimate and absolutely recommended. But I just had some friends, and I was a little bit farther along in German than they were. So I kind of maybe helped them out with their German homework sometimes. We studied together, and then they'd read me a chapter of World Civilizations because I didn't have that textbook. So using some of those creative methods to get your work done is always helpful as well. But definitely planning ahead, talking to whomever you need to talk to, even if it's a little different than usual, and being creative and flexible is very helpful.
Great. Excellent. So obviously following up with that of what we just talked about, blindness, the perspective and view of the blindness differ from culture to culture, countries to country. How did you adjust to this compared to what you get here in the States?
I would say, as far as a lot of the countries I've visited, I've been very blessed that I've been able to travel, some for music, some for singing, also just for family travel or different things. My husband had a mathematics conference in Singapore this summer, so we went over there. I was just along for the ride. And I would say that Germany is one of the quote unquote better ones that is more similar to the United States in that they do have a pretty forward-thinking view of blindness. It's still maybe not always exactly the same, but I was very accepted there. There wasn't really a stereotype of me not being able to do things or that sort of thing. So that was very encouraging. Now, I will say when I did my summer program in Graz, Austria, it was very interesting because they had a lot of things for the blind. They actually had pretty cool, and Germany as well, but I really noticed this in Austria. They had a lot of accessible street crossings. They would have these really cool button you can push that was audible, but then they'd also have a little tactile kind of map of the street so you could tell how many lanes it was. So they'd show you, there are 2 lanes of traffic this way and 2 lanes of traffic this way. I'm like, that is so cool.
Wait,
how
that's
creative,
awesome.
So
Above and beyond.
It was creative. Yeah. They have this in a lot of countries, but the kind of tactile lines that run as a path to get you to certain train station platforms, they have them a lot in train stations or bus stations. Sometimes they kind of have these tactile markings in the pavement that kind of lead you in the direction that you're supposed to go. So they had these different things that were really cool. And I'm like, how great. But you never really saw a lot of blind people. And I went to this place called the Odilian Institute, which is kind of a specific place for blind people. And it was, a good idea that they had this institute, but it kind of seemed like, well, we have all these things out in society for blind people, but the blind people aren't really out in society. So it was kind of an interesting dichotomy where they were doing a lot of good things.
Opposite here.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Things
where the blind people are accepted and they're out in society, but there's nothing for them. No. So it's kind of an interesting reversal of that, where it's like, wow, a lot of the cities are planned with accessibility in mind, but the blind people were kind of off in their institute making their handiwork, which is cool, but expectations were not quite as high. When I was doing my opera program over there, people from the US, they were pretty fine with me being there, but a lot of the people from Austria were like, oh no, is she going to fall off the stage? And the stage was like 6 inches off the ground. And I'm thinking it's not a big deal, even if I did fall off. It was just a little bit, I could tell the expectations were not as high in Europe, which was a little disappointing. Germany, I felt like was a little more forward thinking, which was encouraging. I would encourage students, just not let that phase you too much. Expect that you're going to probably run up against, no matter where you are, you're going to run up against some different ideologies than yours. Probably going to run up against some people who say, wait a second, I don't know, should you be doing that? Where's your helper? Also, it's a great teachable moment, and a lot of people I've found, you start to talk to them, they really say, oh yeah, I guess I never thought of that. There isn't really a reason why a blind person can't do this. You're still going to have an awesome opportunity to spread awareness and to just do your thing and not let it hold you back.
It always comes down to that infrastructure versus expectations, because the country may excel at public transportation even better than what they have here in the States, not as great of an expectation.
Yeah, there
Always
was actually great public transportation in both Germany and Austria, which was awesome. But yes, you are absolutely right. I didn't see a lot of blind people using it.
Every culture does have a super different view on blindness and on independence. Between South Africa and Sweden, the attitudes were very, very different. In South Africa, it was more of a paternalistic type attitude towards blindness and disability in general. People were concerned a lot of the times when I would want to engage in the types of service that we did, even though they weren't actually really manual labor or anything. We were more like there as business consultants, but people did have a lot of reservations, a lot of concerns about me interacting with the business owners and then with other people in the community while we were giving our training sessions, but they were really open. Once they saw kind of how I functioned and they were able to understand a little bit better about my blindness and how it doesn't define me, then they were really receptive to me. I didn't face any negative reactions. I actually faced more negative reactions being a woman than I did as a blind person.
That's so interesting.
Right. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's very, very male centric in South Africa, especially in the more traditional townships that I worked in. In Sweden, the attitude toward blindness was totally different. Everything was set up in a way that promoted independence and allowed me to basically go about my business and do what I needed to do, and gave me the best possible environment to do that. Everything at my school was super, super accessible. There was Braille everywhere. A lot of it was only in Swedish, but it gave me an opportunity to practice my Swedish. There was a lot of accommodations for different types of disabilities. There was not much that they hadn't thought of in the way of accessibility there. And I noticed that the attitude, even going away from the campus and kind of going more into the community in Sweden, people didn't seem to think blindness was a big deal at all. It was just something that I happened to have. Like, I happened to be blind. But yeah, so I did notice that in the two countries I went to, the attitudes were really, really different. And I'll be interested to see where England falls on that spectrum.
That's
Sure.
super interesting because I think a lot of students fear complete negative reactions to blindness. So it's honestly very reassuring to hear you talk about a lot of the positive reactions and opportunities that you did have. Touching on how you were just talking about elevators and braille signage and such, did you find it difficult traveling in another country, or how was it different? And if so, were there any specific strategies that you used, especially in terms of language barriers and those types of problems?
Yeah, so in South Africa, the good thing was that one of the official languages is English, so pretty much everyone knew English. The problem there was that public transit isn't as good as it may be in some other places. So in order to get around the city, I did have to rely more on either like Uber and stuff like that. They actually had Uber, which was cool, or just walking. It was a little challenging at first, especially considering that the areas that we were in weren't necessarily the safest of areas. We kind of went everywhere mostly as a group for that reason in South Africa. In Sweden, it was super easy. The transit was awesome. Like, I'm talking about if the train said it was going to be there at 10:01, it was 10:01 every time.
So, like, unheard of in America.
Yeah. It was really fantastic. And I mean, the coverage was super good. So there wasn't really anywhere that you'd have to walk too far. And everything was super simply laid out. And there were a lot of like apps and stuff. Everything was really digitized. So, and everything that I came across was accessible. Like, there weren't any like inaccessible transit apps or anything like that. Of course, the main language is Swedish. Everything was also translated. The train conductors and stuff, they would announce the stop names in Swedish and then say it again in English. So it was pretty easy to figure out where you were. There was actually Braille on all the trains. Like, the rows were numbered in Braille, and that was super cool.
Definitely the public transportation was great. You know, you get used to it over there and you're like, oh my gosh, the bus is 3 minutes late. Where's the bus? You know, and you're like freaking out because they're so on time. That was really fun to be able to use buses and streetcars and trains. The interesting thing in Heidelberg was the cobblestones. That was a bit of a challenge to get used to, just using my cane. I never really figured out a perfect way to do it because I feel like no matter what you do, your cane's just going to get stuck every once in a while. But there are some people who are a little bit more elegant in their cobblestone travel than I am. Being okay, knowing that you're probably not going to be as perfect at your techniques maybe as in the US, like, because sometimes maybe you're a little confused and I'm like, oh no, okay, so I need to go here, but I also need to ask a question and my German is limited. And so how's this going to work? So being kind to yourself in that way. And it's okay to ask for maybe a little more help than you would, because it's just a little bit more daunting when you're in a country with a different language. So that's okay. Questions are great. I definitely did try to learn a little bit of German ahead of time, which I encourage if you can learn at least a few simple phrases in the language of your new study abroad location. Just, could you help me please? Where's the bathroom?
Direction words.
Yeah, exactly. Direction words, straight, left, right, maybe some transportation words. Where's the bus stop? Learning how to say your address. Those sorts of things are just good in case you ever did get lost and you wanted to ask some questions. And a lot of people, in Germany, a lot of people speak English. So again, it probably depends on what country you're going to. In a lot of Western European countries or Canada or whatever, you're not going to need a foreign language as much, but it is helpful to know those phrases. And I did actually ask for a little bit of O&M training when I went over, just because I was heading over and, wanted to just be as confident as possible. So there's different opinions on that. Some people are totally happy just doing their structured discovery and figuring it out as they went. I just wanted to get, a couple hours of instruction to be like, okay, I got my classroom routine. I got my practice rooms. I've got the main restaurant street. I'm good. I know that, if I'm really tired one day, I really know these routes and I'm not going to need to worry too much, Yeah. And then if I want to go out and branch out and explore, great, I'll do that. I'll go to this other, restaurant I wanted to try, or I'll go to this new supermarket and try that one over there. But that was comforting to me to just have a few routes under my belt in the first week that I was really solid on. I think that's up to you. It's a personal preference. If you want to do that, I am grateful that I just kind of told my university again, I said, hey, disability office in California, can you talk to the people over there? Because they were like, wait, what do you need? What is this? I said, hey, I just need an instructor for like 2-3 hours one day to just get me on the right foot, make sure I'm doing some good routes so I know where I'm going. I don't have to stress out about that as I'm starting, a new semester in a new country with new people, with all these things. It was helpful to have that kind of de-stress.
I do think it's fact that, other countries are, America obviously is ahead of the game with ADA, or what we think it is ahead of the game, but infrastructurally, other countries have the public transit and braille signage and everything in place, even better than America at times. So getting down to some of our last couple questions here, what advice or suggestions would you offer to students or prospective students that are willing to plunge at study abroad challenge, if you will, or an experience? What kind of advice would you give them?
Let's see. So tips and advice. First of all, do it. No, it's if you have the option, I highly encourage you to at least research studying abroad. I am so grateful I had the opportunity. It really broadens one's horizons. It exposes one to more cultural surroundings that might be unique, that might be different. It really opens your mind to see another way people live or think, or a different way of seeing the world. It's really wonderful, expanding and growing yourself as a human being. So that's one reason to just go for it. But also it, looks great on a resume that you studied abroad, that you experienced a different culture. For future, if you want to go on to future degrees, or you want to get a scholarship, or you're looking for a job, especially if what you're studying abroad is applicable to your job. I know people who are in international relations or international business or diplomacy type things or politics. Having something on your resume or your CV where you've studied abroad and you've interacted with another country and really learned about it is really valuable experience for that. So that's a great reason to do it. And it's just fun. Some people are not as adventurous, but I love trying new things. It's an amazing way to travel, to meet new people, to learn a little bit about a new language, try different foods, also while you're over there, really just go for it. How often do you get to, live in a country and eat their food and talk to the locals and find out, what they think about life and how they see things differently, or maybe they see them the same. And anyway, just doing everything you can while you're there too, to just soak everything in. I highly recommend. So yes, if you can research it, check with your university, check non-university programs too. Sometimes there are opportunities, maybe even in a gap year, like maybe right after your undergrad, there are opportunities to do some sort of program abroad. There's things like the Fulbright Scholarship, which I've applied for a few times, and you can research abroad or you can teach English abroad. There are a lot of different ways, even if it's not in a traditional study abroad setting. So definitely look for those creative things. Also, as far as funding goes, I was very fortunate because my study abroad was through my university. And so my funding from the scholarships I had to attend university still carried over, as well as my voc rehab. They were supporting a little bit of my tuition, and even since it was still funded through my university, that remained the same. So definitely don't be discouraged if you think, oh, it's way too expensive. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's exactly the same as your current semester, maybe plus a plane ticket, and if you go out and spend money on souvenirs, but it's definitely doable for a lot of people. So research the options. Again, like I said, prepare, if you can. Of course, that's not always available. Sometimes you have an internship over the summer or a job or a class, and it's really hard to get that preparation in. But if you are able to at least study some of the language, I found that really helpful for me. I hadn't taken an official German class, but I actually just got 1,000 flashcards. And unfortunately, they weren't in Braille, but they were like very large print. And I'm sure there are some in Braille, or there are also programs online where you can do flashcards. You can use VoiceOver or Braille display to read those. And I found that was kind of fun because even though I wasn't learning all the grammar and everything, I learned these words, and then I'd later be in my German class, or I'd be looking at a menu with some friends, and I'd be like, oh, Hähnchen, that means chicken. Like I saw that on my flashcard, or whatever, something really random. Sometimes those little things that jog your brain to kind of get in the mindset of the language is really fun, and it'll pay back later. So definitely studying the language, just make friends, have fun. I was blessed to go over with some other students from my university. So there were 7 of us total, and I became really close friends with them, which was awesome. But I also met some German students over there. We sang in a choir through Heidelberg University. That was an interesting experience in itself because the director spoke 95% in German, but we had a great time, and met some people after that. And one of them invited us to her birthday party, and another one wanted to have dinner or whatever. And so it's just really great to cultivate those friendships. And, some people I still, thanks to Facebook, I still stay in touch with, right? So it's pretty cool that you can meet people from across the world, learn about each other and invest in each other's lives. And then, hey, maybe when you go back and visit 5 years later, you'll still have that friend there. So
awesome.
Meet people. Yeah. And just, be yourself, but also maybe do some things that you wouldn't normally do, because how often do you get a chance to live abroad? Just take in everything that you can.
I could go forever about all the things. I think one of the biggest things is to be on top of your game and get in touch with your university early, your host university, and your home university can help you a lot with this. You don't have to jump in the deep end all by yourself. There are people there who that's what their job is to help you, and they want to see you succeed. They want to see you go abroad. Like that makes their hearts happy to see you go abroad. They're going to do whatever it takes in 99.9% of cases. Keep in constant contact with both your home and your host institution, wherever you want to go. Don't let barriers that you're imagining stop you. For example, attitudes toward blindness, for example, may be different in, India than they are in the US, or Vanuatu, just wherever you want to study. Chances are it's going to be a little shocking, no matter if they're better different, worse different, or just different. But you're going to get over that hump. Like, it's going to feel like crap when you first get there, no matter what, because it's just not what you're used to. But you're going to get over that, and you're going to be so glad that you stuck with it and you kind of were able to be open to another perspective. Make sure you're always open to new experiences. Like, even if you feel like you can't do something, or if it's going to be more difficult, or you're going to be, annoying to someone else, you're not. That's what everyone's there for, to have a good time, to, help you have a good time. I mean, for example, I really wanted to go swimming in the Baltic Sea and jump off this really huge pier, and my professor was kind of against it to start with, but I basically just did it anyways, and it was really fun. I didn't die, and yeah, it was great. So now, how many people can say, yo, I jumped into the Baltic Sea? That just sounds really cool, right? If you don't have a friend who wants to go with you, do it by yourself. You can do it. I totally did so many things by myself. I ate at a restaurant by myself, and I would not do that here. I cannot eat alone. It feels weird, but I totally did it in Sweden. I really like to prove other people wrong, and maybe that's a bad thing.
I think it's a good thing. Keep it up.
It worked out for you in this circumstance, so
Okay, and the last piece of advice that I have is if you're worried about finances, which I totally was, look into scholarships. There are so many different things that you can apply for. There's Fund for Education Abroad, there is Critical Language Scholarship if you're interested in studying a language while you're abroad. There's the Boren Scholarship. There's so many things. There's the Fulbright US UK if you're interested in that and you're kind of just starting your college journey. There's literally scholarships for everything and for every country. So, depending on your program, which your university can help you a lot with deciding what type of program works best for you, you'll be able to use your Pell money, your university scholarships, everything that you get at your home university, you can use for an exchange program. So, make sure you kind of research your program and look at all the scholarship opportunities that are out there. If basically what I'm saying is if you want to go abroad, you're going to be able to go abroad. Don't let money scare you away from trying to go.
We really appreciate all the awesome advice that you gave our students, and I think that after hearing you talk about all the cool places you've been and are going, we're going to have a lot of students asking us to go study abroad.
I totally hope so. It makes my little heart happy as well to see other people go abroad.
Hi, my name is Precious Perez, and I am currently a double major in music education and vocal performance at Berklee College of Music in Boston. I studied abroad in Valencia, Spain at Berklee's campus there in the fall of 2017, and it's an experience that I will never ever forget, and it's the memories that I made there are memories that I will always cherish, and the ways that I learned and the ways that I grew there could not have happened without the experience that I had studying abroad. I knew that I wanted to go to Valencia from the moment that I started school at Berklee because not only do I have family and friends there, but I knew about the program, and I really just wanted to immerse myself in a new culture. So I'm Puerto Rican, and I learned Spanish at a very young age, but I didn't get a lot of practice speaking it. Like, I had the capability to speak it and I knew that I could, but I was so shy because I just didn't practice at home much. We didn't speak it at home really. And so I really wanted to use this opportunity to also gain more confidence in speaking Spanish and being more confident being able to switch back and forth between English and Spanish without missing a beat. And so I figured there was no better way to do it than to just go to Valencia and study. I couldn't have been more right about that. I ended up applying and I got everything in order, passports, visas, all of that thing. The study abroad office was very helpful with all of that stuff. When it came time to finally go to Valencia, I was feeling so many things. I know my mom was nervous. She was like, "Are you going to be okay?" My mom's always been, I got lucky with her. There's never been an issue of me being different than other people or me not being able to have my independence, because ever since I was young, she said, "You're going to grow up and do everything like everyone else." And I will always appreciate that. And so even though she was nervous, she made sure I was all ready to go. We made sure I had everything I needed, the European plug adapters and all those things. It was a surreal feeling just knowing that I was getting on a plane to go to another country by myself. No one else, just me, and embarking on this new journey. And it was amazing. It was nerve-wracking. It was thrilling. I was feeling so many things I couldn't even really comprehend. But I will forever be grateful for that experience, and I will always say to anyone who inquires about study abroad, go and do it. As a blind person in Spain, I was really worried about, okay, this is another country. Things aren't going to be the same as they are in the U.S., and how am I going to have everything made accessible to me? And I was just really unsure about the culture around blindness and disability. But everyone was so warm and so welcoming, and it wasn't the attitude that we see here in the U.S. where, "Oh, I don't know how to help you, so I'm sorry, you have to deal with that, too bad, you're on your own." It was, "I don't know how to help, I've never done this before, but tell me how to help you and we'll make it work." And I think when it comes down to it, as far as people's education around blindness and disability, it's the attitude that really makes it. If people are willing to help and willing to make things work, then that's the foundation for everything else. And they definitely had that. And it was so refreshing to be around people who maybe they didn't always know how to help or what to do, or how do you make this document accessible? How do you do this, that, and the other? But they were so willing to help. And there was a blindness organization called ONCE in Spain, and I got connected with them, which was extremely helpful because I ended up having 2 broken canes, and those were my only canes. So I had to get a new one from there. So that was extremely helpful. They were all so nice, and I actually worked with an O&M instructor in Valencia, but the problem with Valencia is that it's not a city that's, it's a popular city, but it's not somewhere that's commercial. I couldn't really walk around independently around those streets and the curbs because there were streets where you could cross while cars are going. And there were streets that it wasn't safe to walk around. There were no pedestrian signs. There was nothing. That ended up being a blessing in disguise because I was able to connect with more people and make friends and get around with them, and they had a My Taxi app that's kind of like Uber, and I was able to use that to get around when I had Wi-Fi connection. So I did have my independence. It looked a little bit different than it does in the US, but I still maintained my independence. I firmly believe that independence isn't always you have to do everything yourself. Like, it's knowing when you need help and knowing when to ask for it, and there's no shame in that. And that was something that became more ingrained in my mind when I was there, because there were things, yes, I definitely needed help to do. And I needed help to get around, and I did need to depend on people sometimes. It wasn't anything to be ashamed of. It wasn't anything to look down on. And I grew so much as a performer, as an activist, as everything when I was there because I was able to connect with so many people. The campus in Valencia has about 200, 300 students, the master students and the people in undergrad programs, as opposed to Berkeley, Boston, which is 6,000 students. It was just so much more of a community-based campus. Everybody was so nurturing. All the staff, I really, really grew to love them and connect with them, and it was like a family. I formed a band for the first time, played a set, 3 songs at this big showcase with them. Those were things I never thought I could do or would do or have the opportunity to do. And I got to do those things there. I got to perform at multiple events. I got to be involved in the community there. There were so many things that I had the opportunity to do, and I just took advantage of everything. And it was the best thing I could have done. Because even when I got back to Boston, and it was so hard for me to be back in such a different environment after realizing how wonderful that one was, I knew that I could do the things that I had done there, and I could do those things anywhere. And I was so much more confident. I had to speak Spanish because that was how I had to communicate with everybody there. And so that's what I did. Like, our campus was taught in English and everybody spoke English, but outside of that, everybody spoke Spanish. And so I really jumped right into it. I think that they always seem more scary when you think about them. You don't want to let fear get in the way of an experience that's going to change your life. And I think especially as blind students, a lot of blind students don't study abroad for one reason or another, whether they're nervous about the differences in culture, the differences in services. But I think part of life is experiencing things and learning how to adapt to things and work around things and really test your ability to adapt and your ability to make an experience happen. Because if we're supposed to achieve our own goals and live the lives that we want to live, then we have to take risks. And we have to put ourselves out there and go and do things that maybe we're afraid to do sometimes. Study abroad was one of those things for me. I was really excited. I was nervous. I was terrified, but it was so worth it. I blogged my entire experiences every week, entire semester, and documented almost everything that I felt, that I went through. Now I have those memories. I've got the pictures and the videos and the moments that I was able to turn something around or make something work in a place where I wasn't familiar with anything. I think it's important for students to realize we can do everything we want to do. You can go study abroad, and you should. Everybody should. It's an experience that's life-changing. It'll inspire growth and change beyond what you probably can imagine just thinking about it. It really is an empowering thing to say, I went to a new place by myself. I lived and I made memories and I learned, and it was fantastic. So that's my experience with studying abroad in Valencia, Spain, and I would encourage anyone and everyone to study abroad if they have the opportunity to do so.
I'd like to thank our special guests, Johna Wright, Katelyn Macintyre, and Precious Perez. I hope that this podcast was informative to all students who are looking into study abroad. And thank you to my co-hosts. See you.